Mm-hmm. Gosh, she's loud. Well, here we are. It is No Boring Stories. This, of course, is the place where, Andrea, we don't share any boring stories.
We're not
We
boring.
just get into the good stuff
Mm-hmm.
because there is no boring story. There is only boring storytellers, and you are not a boring storyteller. And my audience is going to see that very quickly, I believe. And we're going to have a lot of fun here, recognizing that your story is yours, but it's also ours. It's also ours to share. And you do such a great job at, um, just sharing who you are with us. You're a podcast host, you're an author, you're a coach. You've done all these things to put yourself out there for an audience. And I think that it shows in the way that you show up with such empathy for the
Aw.
listener already and
Thank you.
the person on the other end. And so that's why I just appreciate you, and that's why I'm excited to have you on here. How are you?
I am good, and I am so excited for your brand new podcast. This is so fun. I
Yeah.
love the premise of this. And you know what? It's so funny you're saying I'm not a boring storyteller because I, for a long time, thought I was a boring storyteller.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
so, it was like, thinking, like, there's people that that tell a really good story. Like you're a good storyteller. And there's like that uncle or that cousin that you have that always
Of
shows up to
course.
like the party and they like have this really good story. And I was like, it came to me and I'm like, oh, I don't really have a great story to tell.
Yeah.
And it
Do you
kind of
think
falls
that that
flat.
uncle thinks that he's a good storyteller?
I think sometimes they're like, they know they're a good storyteller. And then there's like I have a friend who knows, like she says it. She's like, I tell good stories. In fact, I should
Hmm.
get her on your podcast. She's
Yes,
a really good
absolutely.
storyteller.
There we go.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think even, you say that about me, and to some degree a lot of people have been saying that about me for years, which is why I have leaned into this, finally really accepting that this is a gift that I have. But there was always this confusion around that. People saying, "Oh, Alex, you're a really good storyteller." And I'm thinking, what do you mean? Go like being a pastor, being in that realm, in that world, which I know you know as well. We'll get
Oh
into your
yeah.
story, but being in
Hmm.
that church ministry world, somebody gets up every week and tells a story that is 1,000-year-old story, thousands of year old story, and turns it into our story. Of course, I'm a good storyteller. I'm in front of people speaking, but there was something. This is what I'm realizing. People were always they were actually saying there's something else. You're not
Yeah.
just a storyteller, you're a good storyteller. And occasionally you're a great storyteller. And what I believe, you don't have to be a great storyteller to stand out, Andrea. You just have to be a good storyteller, because even good stories get remembered. And so, whether it's Uncle Jim or Aunt Betty or your weird cousin who t- who after a few wobbly pops will just have the room in stitches, um, we just have to figure out, how do we tell a captivating story. And I think that's what this is all about, is really just getting yours out, because that's what's going to captivate people. If you can bring people along the journey, then you've got them. And that's where I think you stand
Yeah.
out. You have this ability to listen and to pull someone else's story out. And I think as long as I've known you, you have even gotten more focused in telling your own story. So I'm excited
Appreciate
for
that.
this. Yeah. But even as you say that, you're like, there's a few people, you know, yeah, uncle, whatever.
But you know
Who
what? There's a
else?
difference. There's a
Yeah.
difference because like I think you're right. Like there's some really good storytellers, but they're telling a story about something that's not their story. Versus when you're telling your story, because when you're telling your story, that's
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
That's like opening yourself up
Mm-hmm.
to being exposed to other people.
Yeah.
And when
And
you're
so we
telling someone
we
else's
hide
story,
something. Yeah.
yeah, it's like I can like tell this amazing story about somebody else
Mm-hmm.
as long as I can tell the story.
And that's the thing, right? But you're like, okay, so the weird uncle can tell a story about freaking going to the library today, and you're captivated.
Exactly.
So there is something in there that he's got, that he can just draw you in. But
Hmm.
exactly what we're talking about here is, yeah, but what's your story? Like,
Yeah.
what is his story? And I bet he would be terrified to tell his story, right? Those are the people.
100%. Yep.
So how do we get to this place where you are telling not just every story better, but you're telling your story better, because your story is what's actually going to change the world. When you share your story, you shape the world. So let's do that better.
Let's do it. I'm
Let's
ready.
do it.
I receive that.
This is so good. What are you doing? Tell me what your main work is that you're bringing to the world these days, Andrea.
Well, as you know, but many people probably don't,
Of
I
course.
spent years as a high school music educator and also a pastor. That's how we met. I
Okay, but
was,
just a
yeah.
second here, because
Oh, yeah.
this
I'm
is
telling the backstory.
I didn't ask that. This is
No,
what's
you didn't. You're
so
right.
fun. And I mean, I get it. I love it. You're like,
Yeah.
let me tell you how I got here. But all that I wanted to know is I just
That's so
asked, um,
true.
who are you now? What's the main work you're bringing to the world now? And if I can ask, what is that? Why did you jump
That's a
back?
great question. I think because there's context for that there. And sometimes when I'm in the new story,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have to validate the new story.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes waiting to validate the new story is like, giving yourself permission to say, this is who I am
Yeah.
and standing in that, which is, yeah, that can be tough. That's vulnerable.
Yeah.
So back to the vulnerability. So who am I?
Exactly.
What work do I do?
Yeah.
I'm a mindset and confidence coach.
There we go. So this is
That's,
it, right? So there's something in that. I'm just
mhm.
asking where you are, because that's the key. So it's like that's so that people get a really good context for
Yeah.
where you are right now. This is the who I am of the story. And you felt for some reason, before I even say who I am, before I reveal my who I am right now, I need to validate that. Yeah, I need to paint the picture
Yes.
along the way so that you believe that when I say I am a mindset and confidence coach, you believe me.
Oh my gosh, that is so true.
And we'll get there.
Yeah.
Like, what we're going to do now is actually just go back. Now I want to hear the rest of
Yeah.
that story. How did you
You
get here? But it's actually this crazy mind game that we play with ourselves, isn't it? Where you're like, they're
mhm.
not going to believe me. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man. Okay.
Yeah.
He doesn't go forward and say, who are you? He's like, well, I was a 16-year-old kid in Queens, and then I went out one day and I got bit by, no, I'm Spider, like, I'm Iron Man. They just tell you who they are. And
Yeah.
then we'll go to the origin story. And that's the fascinating. That's what's going to draw us into the whole thing to really believe them now. But
Well,
for
bam.
now, um, okay, mindset confidence coach. What does that mean? What do you do? And how do you see that impacting people?
Well, I primarily work with multi passionate creatives, entrepreneurs, coaches, really helping them stand in their worth. So,
Mm,
knowing who they are and just really stepping fully into their purpose by identifying what's holding them back in different places in their life, because I find that so many don't actually realize the potential for their business or for what they're doing because their mindset holds them back. They
hmm.
lack the confidence to step in. So that's where I come in,
Yeah.
is really empowering them to dig a little deeper and to uncover what that is so that they can reframe it and they can actually stand on their own 2 feet
Hmm.
and they can be confident at what they're doing.
I love it.
Hmm.
It's so good. So now we've got this deep why. You're like, all right, this is why I'm showing up the way I am as a mindset and confidence coach. Now we've got this really clear context
Yeah.
for where you are. So now the question is, how in the world did you get here? Where does that begin? This idea
Yeah.
of, you said specifically creatives.
Yeah.
So there's a creativity aspect there, but let's say like creatives knowing their worth, knowing they have value. Where does that begin for you? Like, as a kid, as a teenager, where does that show up first? Where you're like, oh, I, I don't know my own worth, or I do know, I have these I really believe this about myself. Where does that idea kind of show up for you? That feeling?
When I was a kid,
Yeah.
I sang and I played the piano really young. And I was put on a stage to perform probably before I was even 5 years old.
Mhm.
And so a lot of my validation came from what I could do. So being praised for being a good singer, good musician, and that went on for years. And I started to identify worth and validation from what it was that I could do as a talent.
Mhm.
And I neglected to understand that my worth was innately in me. And so when it came to even being a singer songwriter, in college and wanting to put myself out there,
Mhm.
I was relying on this performance aspect and not in I had no confidence. Like
Yeah.
I was a confident performer, but that's different than having confidence to step into and embody being that successful singer-songwriter.
So that sounds like a really like, "Ooh, wow, yeah, that's" tweet that out, but also, what in the world does that mean? So I was a really confident performer, but had no confidence.
Yeah.
What what's the difference? What like again, don't try to I would
Yeah.
say don't try to define this as some Webster
Yeah.
dictionary thing in the context of that story. Like even if there's a moment that you can recognize that you can think of where like, you might be able to go out and kill it
Mhm.
on stage, tickling the ivories, but then backstage, how did you feel? Right? Is that the difference? Is that what it comes down to? Is just this separation of self in the moment? And is there a moment that you can really draw to that demonstrates that?
I remember standing on stage, like lights could be on you and I'd come alive. Like I would feel like I'm in the zone, like I'm totally exactly where I need to be.
Yeah.
I love being on the stage. And but there was the part of me that wasn't even in backstage, like the nerves, like I could handle the nerves.
Yeah.
That wasn't the problem. Wasn't actually performing that was the problem. It was believing that I had what it takes to
So
be
where
a good singer-songwriter and to be
when did
someone who
that
want
show up? Like, does that show up when you're
in
sitting in the living does that
college.
show up in the morning? You know what I mean? Like, when you
Yeah.
wake up in the morning, when you're drinking, or you're like, "Why am I doing this? Who am
It showed
I?"
up when
Like
I started to see that there were so many really, really good singer-songwriters and that I was like just a small fish in a big pond. And I was, reminded daily that, well, get a good education because you're going to need a stable job and
right.
all those things reinforced this belief that okay, well, I love standing on the stage and I'm confident to do that, but am I confident enough to actually live that out and embody it and make it a reality for my life? And that's where I couldn't do it. I couldn't actually at that time, I couldn't step forward and go, yeah, I'm going to position myself as someone who can get, signed with a label and then
Mhm.
go on tour and do all those things. And even though I felt like I had the ability and the skill,
Yeah.
I didn't have, I felt like I didn't have what it takes to like really make it in the industry.
Because what was that? What does that take? What did that require? What did you think it took? Was it
I think
looks? Was
it,
it knowledge? Was it something like
some
what
sort
did
of
those
like
people have?
magical appeal or charm or something that I felt like I didn't have. Ability to promote myself, ability
Mhm.
to step up and really sell who I was and to showcase that. I was like, let me sing for you. Yes, great,
Yeah.
fine, I can do that. But don't ask me to sell myself and sell my music and album to you because I don't want to actually have to talk about myself and tell you who I am and how good I am. I'll
Uh-huh.
let my talent tell you how good
Mhm.
I am, but don't make me because that's really scary. That's really vulnerable. I don't feel like I have what it takes
Yeah.
to be there.
Because what? So if you're sitting across the table from somebody and you're 20 years old at this point,
Yeah.
no, and you in this fantasy situation where you have to pitch yourself apparently and say why you're going to be a good face for this label. You're like, there's no way. I could
No, not at all.
never,
Mm-mm.
no, I could not do that. But put me behind the piano and I can play the music for you and then let the music speak for itself.
Yeah. I'm like, is there a
So
way to do that? I'm like,
right.
no.
Yeah, I know, right? So this is the thing, right? So you're talking about like being a performer. I'm a performer. I put me on stage. I'm the happiest in the world.
Hmm.
And there is something that happens when you can be the character. So I with acting for me is what your song would be.
Yeah.
Um, let me be a role. Let me be a character. Let me work according to the script. And and it's great and it's easy. But then get me out there to say this is why I should yeah, this is why, let me promote myself. Let me sell myself to you. There's this separation. There's this barrier that shows up, and I think you already identified that. All that we did was just pull that out and show you what it feels like.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing that so many people. This is where your story's so relatable. So many people are feeling that. They're like, I know I've got the skill. I know I've got the thing.
Yeah.
And if I could just let the thing speak for itself, if somebody could just notice the thing that I do, it would sell.
That's
I would be
exactly how
so
I
big.
felt. That's
Mhm.
exactly how I felt. Yeah. 100%.
Because what's on the other end of that? For you to show up and talk about yourself, you would need that's the confidence piece. But more than anything, you would need to believe what about yourself,
I would need to believe that I'm worthy of that.
right?
Hmm.
So now here we are in college, and you're facing this real separation between worthiness and unworthiness, and like, or skill and unworthy. Like, there's this real, there's no question of do you have the ability. The question is about value.
Yeah.
So how do you what happens? How do you move forward and break out of that to get to the place where you are now showing up and saying, this is what I do, and this is who I am, and this is how I help people. Something happens in that gap of time,
Hmm.
and you can pick one of the many moments that sort of shows up and helped you see this was the change that needed to happen.
Hmm.
What comes to mind?
I I think for me, one of the big things was not doing it for 20 years and finally leaving my career and feeling like I had nothing left and realizing I
Not doing
hadn't.
what for 20 years?
So, not taking that chance.
Oh, yeah.
So, deferring it and saying, okay, well, I'll just do the stable thing.
Uh-huh.
And that really, for 20 years, I was struggling with anxiety and depression,
What was the stable thing for you?
was teaching high school music, being a pastor, worship leader,
Mhm.
singing for a living under the guise of, being a high school music teacher and then being someone who led music in the church.
Right.
So I got to sing,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't have to do anything to promote myself. I could help people, I could teach people, I could do all those things, but it was never putting myself forward.
Yeah.
It was always to do something else. Getting to the end of that, when I finally left, realizing that I was, had been struggling with anxiety and depression and kind of hitting rock bottom, that was the turning point for me.
How long ago was that?
It was 2014, so 5 years ago.
Shoot. So, okay.
Hmm.
Isn't that interesting that you're like, I'm gonna take the stable thing. And again, you talk about relatable stories. This is where it all shows up. You'd go through the stable thing, and that in that stable thing, it's actually that's where depression and anxiety show up and creates this wild instability
Yeah.
internally.
Hmm.
Did people know that about you?
No, I didn't even know that about me.
Oh,
I
how
was
did that show up
functioning.
then? How did you know? When did that
When I started to when I became a coach full time and things weren't working out quick enough for me, it started to become really, really obvious that I lacked confidence because, again, I was a really good coach,
uh-huh.
but I had, also been a really good teacher, a really good pastor and worship leader, but I had the system that could support me in order to keep pushing me forward. It's like the machine moves you forward.
Yeah.
When I went out on my own for the first time in 2014 as a coach, I faced the very thing that I would have faced back in 1997 when I graduated from college and chose to go into teaching instead of pursuing my career in music.
Okay. So you feel like, wait, how many years? 20 years later?
Yeah.
You face this similar situation where you're like, I'm on my own. I can make the choice. I can go into this on my, or I can go and hide
Yeah.
behind some others, behind the organization or whatever.
Yeah.
And you chose to
To,
go on your
to
own.
stay and fight, finally, to fight it out. And it was a slog because for me, it was the very thing that I would have wanted. And I remember thinking that, Alex. I remember thinking to myself, in when I recognize it. So like let's say it was like not necessarily 2014 because that's when it started, but like
Sure.
maybe by 2015, 2016, I'm not making any progress. I'm not really doing what I'm not really making a whole lot of money. I'm going into debt. I've, went from, having savings and no debt to being a struggling coach, entrepreneur, and I'm facing the very, very thing that I didn't want to face,
Yeah.
graduating college, which was, am I going to just think my skill is going to carry me here? Like my talent as a coach? Because it's not about talent or skill because nobody knows about that. It's about really embodying this confidence. And I couldn't at the time.
Hmm.
I didn't know how.
Who taught you or guided you to be able to do that then? Who shows up?
Yeah. I had a lot of guides. I
Why take
had
one when you could pick
yeah,
20?
I had a lot of guides. Um, but there was one particular time frame where
Hmm.
there were a couple people in a row. And I felt like it almost came like a little bit of a momentum shift for me
Hmm.
where I worked with a coach who helped me really, really heal from some of the wounds that um, I had gone through
Yeah.
over the 20 years. She held space for me.
And again, these
She,
are things that you didn't even necessarily know you were just internalizing, you were holding
yeah,
on to, you said, right?
yeah, and I had been, as I mentioned, it had been in ministry for years, and
Yeah.
I was going through faith deconstruction. So there was the coach who was, holding that space, and then there's the therapist that showed up and said, okay, I think, there's some places you can heal.
Hmm.
And as I started to do in tandem those two things, healing myself
Yeah.
through therapy, and I also worked with a natural health practitioner and kind of did some body work as well. I was healing my soul, I was
Mm.
healing my mind, and I was healing my body.
Hmm.
And when I started to go through that process and started to realize that it is like a holistic way of living, and showing up for myself means taking care of myself. When I take care of myself, it means that I'm learning to be who I was created to be, and I could live confidently, and I could kind of really start to discover who I am, not what I do, but who I am and what I have to offer. And I started to heal those really tough things that I had gone through, like, and I won't get into what they were, but um, it was a really, really hard time in my life prior to that.
Yeah.
And when I got to that place, um, I reached out to you. We had known each other through ministry, but we'd also known each other as coaches and podcasters.
Hmm.
And I had gotten enough healing that I said, I'm ready to dive into my story,
Yeah.
because I wasn't ready before that, because I hadn't gotten the healing I needed
That's
to tell my
so,
story.
yeah. So there's this back and forward. Like you've
Yeah.
got to go back so that you can go forward. So the healing is actually looking and like, yeah, okay, let's heal that wound. Let's
Yeah.
uncover that, open the gash, and then stitch it up properly, right? Like there's this so that you are stronger to go forward. And so when you came to me, that was like, all right, I've already uncovered all this stuff again. I'm not afraid anymore? Like,
Yeah, I was ready. I think I was ready to talk about it.
right.
I was ready to own it.
There you go.
I was ready to show up as that person.
Mhm.
I think what I was realizing in that time, and even like through digging through my story, was I didn't want to show up as who I was. I wanted to show up as a singer. I didn't want to show up as Andrea, who
Yeah.
is able to sing.
Ooh. Yeah. What what the difference is saying I
Yeah.
am a singer?
Yeah. It's like yeah, I can sing.
So now go back to
Hmm.
20-year-old Andrea, again, that
Yeah.
fantasy, stand in front of the record label. The difference is she could show up and say, "I can sing, let me show you."
Hmm.
But to stand there and say, "I'm a singer," would have been impossible.
Yeah. No. And I think because I didn't know who I was,
Right.
I didn't know that it was because of who I was that gave me the capacity to move people in song, because there's a difference
Oof.
between
So good.
singers and
Mhm.
great singers, like great phenomenal, you know, we know them, like Aretha
Sure.
Franklin is a great singer. When
Sure.
she sings, like her soul is like bared for the world.
Mhm.
I heard her in concert, and I remember hearing her and hearing the sound of her voice, and I was like, if she carried me like through like a story,
Yeah.
and I felt connected to her. I felt like I was, experiencing something. I was held. I was, and because she was so vulnerable in who she was,
Mhm.
and singing was an outworking of who she was. It was a way she healed herself. It was a way she told her life story. It was a way she moved the world, was through her singing. Like that was how she did it.
Right.
It wasn't because she was a good singer, but I didn't know the difference. I had been hinged on like, I'm a good singer, not that, Andrea, you have something in you to tell the world. You have something that is so important inside of you that bubbles up within you that every time you get, and I had it then, Alex. Like, that's a really like crazy part is like, I can remember being on the stage at that time and people like, they knew like, you have it, Andrea,
Yeah.
because it would come out, but I didn't know how to express that and how to embody it and how to live it out, and to then take it off the stage and go, yeah, like I'm that same person off the stage as I am on the stage, and let me tell you who I am, because I am just freaking fabulous off the stage.
And this is such good stuff. My goodness, somebody needs to go back. Somebody's listening to this and has their mouth wide open, right? They're just jaw dropped. That is such gold that you just hit us with. And and there are so many of us walking around trying to live based on our talents and trying to impress people based on that, and in doing so are letting who they are stay hidden,
Hmm.
and wondering why they're not getting noticed, wondering why they're not standing out. And it's just as you say, it's because we actually haven't seen you yet. We've
Yeah.
seen what you can do, but we don't know who you are.
Come on, preach. This is
And
what I need to
so
hear.
this is the journey that you and I have
Yeah.
both been on and have shared and have thankfully been able to walk this journey together, is to
Yeah.
see each other really go into that core and pull that out and show that to the world and say, look, this is who I am. This is what I believe. And the way I'm going to get that out is, well, today it's through a podcast.
Yep.
Tomorrow, maybe I'll sing a song and put it up live. The next day, it'll be probably a one-on-one session with somebody. Maybe tomorrow I'll create a group coaching program and get it out that way. But but my belief, that's the thing that you're carrying with. That's what shows forward. That's what those people, when you were right 20 years old, that's what they saw in you. It's just nobody knew how to identify it. Nobody knew how to define that.
Yeah. And you know what is it even more so, doing? Yes, I can do all those things. I think the real confidence that I stepped into, I think when I started embodying it, was when I didn't have to do anything anymore. Like I could just be.
How does
I
that
could
show up? I
so
mean, like, what did that look like when you
it
realized, like, I don't have
I'm
to do
on
this
my
anymore?
own. I'm happy in my own skin. I'm just me. I'm taking a walk and I'm grateful today and I'm loving this day and I'm loving my life and I'm not wishing it was something different or I was something different. And that is when I started to understand, oh, like I own who I am. I own my life now. And because of that, I have this like depth of confidence to pour into all of these things that I do
Yeah.
because it's from me. It's from me.
What is that belief? What is the thing that you believe about you and about the world, people now as you wake up, you think about that?
I know it's not just me for sure. Like I know it's something we all access and we can all
Mhm.
access. And I was reminded of this today actually because I realize I have not spent a lot of time connecting back to source.
Mhm.
And for me, that looks a little bit different these days. But for me, that's, getting alone with God,
Mhm.
whether that's going out in nature. And when I can feel so connected to something bigger than myself,
Yeah.
then I am infused with this, like, I don't know, love, energy,
Yeah.
this thing that feels so real and palpable that it just like, it fills me up inside and it reminds me of who I am. It reminds me of what I have to give. It reminds me that I do want to give. It reminds me of all the things that I'm capable of doing. And I'm not even capable of doing yet, but I'm going to be capable of doing at some point,
Yeah.
you know, and just to give all those things out and
And
let
so
the
that's what you do with people
yeah, and
now
we all
is it
have
to
that.
help them see that they're part of something bigger, they're connected to something bigger than them, and once they kind of just actually like zone out from looking so pigeonholed at their life and that thinking that they're the only one, that now they're connected to something bigger and that is the inherent value that they have. Like that's how
Yeah,
I'm just defining what you just said. Does that make
absolutely.
sense? I don't want to.
Yeah. And I think I used to probably look at it in terms of doing and being like, it's the purpose of your life to do something. But I think the purpose of your life isn't it to do, it's to be. And if you can be who you were created to be, you will do what you were created to do. But if you're trying to do first, then being becomes impossible. And that was where I was stuck for years was in the doing. I'm skilled, I'm talented, I can do all of these things. Look at how wonderful I am. But I was never being that. I was not embodying that. I look at sometimes now at, other people who are embodying certain things and then growing in their craft
Mhm.
alongside and like maybe they're not the best at it, but they believe it
Mhm.
and they're embodying it and they're stepping into it and
Well, I
taking
mean,
off.
thank you for being here and being part of my ever growing, ever expanding effort to get better at this. Like that's what this is. I think that's what
Mhm.
this all is once you have the ability, the confidence to say, all right, well, this is who I am.
Mhm.
I can't show up any other way. Or if I
Yeah.
do, it's going to be inauthentic and it's not going to feel good. I'm going to feel drained and people aren't going to want to be near me. And so as I start to show up and say, yeah, no, I'm a storyteller. That's who I am. Well, now this is an effort of me leaning into that even more and saying, well, all right, let's get stories out then. And not just a story, but let's like actually break this down a little bit and try to figure that out and see what makes a good story and what makes your story so captivating, Andrea. Like that's what this is. And do I feel like I have reached some pinnacle right now? Absolutely not. Holy crap, I'm still so green in this. But I'm willing to try and to keep pushing this forward and risk it. Risk that who I am is worth doing what I'm doing. And that's that's the fun of this, I think. That's when you know that like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, okay, wow, something's become clear
But you
because I'm
know
willing
what?
to give this a shot.
because I saw you before this, and I saw you when you knew you were a good storyteller,
Mhm.
but then when you started to truly believe in yourself, that's when your stories came to life and you were able to also help other people bring their stories to life.
Which is the beautiful part of this whole
Yeah.
thing, which is where your story is our story,
Yeah.
Andrea, and I appreciate that. I appreciate what you're saying there. And this is what I see in this whole thing, which is so phenomenal because at the beginning, right, I said, "Okay, who are you? What are
Yeah.
you doing now?" And you're like, "Well, I once was a teacher." And it's like, "Hold on,
Yeah.
hold on, hold on." And so your mindset coach who helps creatives stand in their worth.
Mhm.
And then we just got this, 20-25 minute story that fills in the gap that we are all asking of like, okay, how do you get there? What does that mean? And now we see that if you're somebody who is showing up, trying to do, or even identifying with what you do, but you don't know who to be, Andrea was there, was living in that, and felt confident in the performance, but so lacking in confidence in the personality, let's say, in showing up as a person. Um, and over these 20 years of finding the stable root and taking that and slowly going deeper into depression and anxiety and finally coming to this place of that being revealed and that being noticed and then doing the work to heal all those wounds so you can go forward. Now you're showing up saying, I'm going to be before I do. And
Yeah.
if I am being the person I'm created to be, then I'm going to do what I'm created to do. And so there's a story here of like from doing to being. And if that's where you feel like you are, well, then Andrea's story is your story as well. And that is the freaking magic of all of this. Would you agree?
100%. 1,000,000%.
Gosh, it's so fun. So, what do you do with that? If somebody finds themselves in that position, they're like, I am so tired of doing and waiting for the opportunity to come to me. I am so done with this. Does everybody need to go out on their own and do their own thing and make a business of their own talent and skill? Is that the answer to this? Or is there, what do you see and how do you help people move through that?
I think that you can do it at any place in your life. So it doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur or you have to have a business or you can be in corporate or not working at all. In fact, you could have no capacity for work at all and be. Because I think that so often there's so many people in the world that we gloss over because we're like, what's the value add that they have?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, some of those people are the most amazing people to be around. They're the most life giving people to be around because they might not have the capacity to offer something in doing, whether it's work or whether it's, physicality in their
Yeah.
body. And they embody this beautiful essence of who they are and the space they take up in the world. And it's like people want to be around them because it's like so peaceful and joy filled, because it's like they don't have to do anything but
Yeah.
show up and be purposeful. They just are purposeful. And I think when you realize that, like when you really get that, you can choose to do anything. You can take your gifts and you can make them a business. You can do it in a corporate setting. You can be a parent and
Mm-hmm.
outwork it as a parent or
Mm-hmm.
as, a bonus parent or on your own. It doesn't really matter. But I think that that's the whole thing, is like taking that step back and going, wow, like we're always looking for this way to just do and then have something happen in return and
Yeah.
receive in return. I'm like, no, just be who you are. People are attracted to that. They're attracted to who you are. They are going to want more of that, whether that's, going to come back to you monetarily, or whether it's going to come back to you in creativity or collaboration or opportunity or all the things.
Yeah.
Just be
Yeah.
yourself.
it's the I'm just getting this image of like Aretha Franklin, sitting around in a room because she knows so clearly who she is. She carries a different presence with her just in a genuine general conversation.
Yeah.
But for her to truly show up and really express her gifts, yeah, give her a microphone. Like that's going to be the thing. But for some of
She
us,
changes the world that
that
way.
that's the thing. For some of us,
Mhm.
that microphone actually looks like a casserole dish that you're bringing over
Yeah.
to a friend who just lost somebody. Do you know what I mean? Like that is the way that you show up in this world, and the way that you do shape it, because you know that this is your role to play. And if you can help somebody realize that this isn't just an act of doing, but this is me being who I am, well, then you, in your gifts, Andrea, that you're priceless. That's the gift. That's the thing. If you can help us realize and get to the point where people are saying confidently, "This is who I am."
Mhm. You just made me think of something which I appreciate because I think I'm going to take this out and start applying it more to my life. But
Fabulous.
I think that, when we attach to doing something in our lives, whether it's in our business or whatever, and we kind of hitch our cart to the horse, go, here it is, right?
Yep.
But as we grow and expand in our capacity, so does our capacity for what we do, right? So as our being expands and we learn more about who we are, our capacity for what we're capable of holding space for in our work, in our creativity, in our collaboration, also that expands too.
Hmm.
And so we have to know that that is also going to change and grow and expand. And so what you might be doing today might look a little bit different in 6 months, a year, 6 years from now. But if you're growing in your being, then that's going to be an outflow of that and it's just going to keep expanding. So if you feel like what you're doing is not expanding right now, it's because what you're being is not expanding.
Ooh.
And I think that for me is something that I need to take because I need to step into a new level in my own business. And that requires me being that person and embodying that which I need to embody. And
Yeah.
it's there. It's just stepping into the fullness of that because
Wow.
it's a new level for me in doing. But I can't do it if I don't be it. So,
This is so good. This is what I love about, I mean, thinking about boring stories, and as we kind of wrap up here, thinking of what makes a story boring. Um, I think so much of it actually is when people just talk about what they're doing.
yeah.
And it's the events that happened rather than who they were along the way or how they felt. And the thing that draws us into stories is the emotion. And that's the most powerful aspect of it and the greatest tool that we have. And it's the thing that most of us are missing. And again, what makes for a boring story is you just told me what you did. So what? Tell me what happened along. Tell me who you were along the way. Even if it
Yeah.
is you just going to the library.
Yeah.
How'd you feel beforehand? How'd you feel afterwards? That's the thing that's going to create a captivating story. And what you just told us was this journey of just going through life doing whatever you could do. I can sing, to getting to the point where you say, no, 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 actually, like I am a singer. More than that, I am a creator. More than that, I am valuable beyond what I do.
Mhm.
That's a captivating story that I could hear again and again and again. And I do, honestly. And I know that there's people listening who also have felt that same story and lived through that. And so let's wrap this up with, what's your storytelling advice for somebody coming to you and saying like, all right, how can I be a better storyteller? What do you like? What's just something, just shamelessly, just like put it out there and be like, oh my goodness, you've got to do this or not do this. What do you think makes for a better story?
I would say stop looking at other people. I would say that's number 1.
And trying to tell stories like they do, or what do you?
Just just looking for their what are they doing that's working?
Mm,
Because I think that when you are able to like just do what you feel you're supposed to be doing,
Mhm.
and telling your own story, whether that's showing up somewhere like as a podcaster, for me, that's telling stories,
Yep.
creating content, telling stories, showing up on social media is telling stories. But when I am looking at what other people are doing, I am getting so involved in where they are that I lose sight of who I am, and I stop telling the story that I need to tell. So if I just dial it back in and go, all right, you're doing great work. I'm glad you're doing that and that's working for you. I need to do this because this is who I am and this is what I'm in alignment with. This is going to resonate with the people who need to hear my story, and it keeps me in my own lane.
Mhm.
I want
Mhm.
to applaud everybody else doing all the other things, but that doesn't mean I have to do them.
Oh,
And
it's good. Tell your story. Don't worry about their story or what they even want to hear. I think that's it. We're here to tell. I don't know if the world has changed in that way or if that's just how it's always been, and we're recognizing that, and it's been an adjustment period with social media
yeah,
and all the tools that we have available to us, but there is this movement, I believe, a shift towards just tell your own thing. Like, don't tell theirs. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about what we want to hear or what you think we want to hear. This is where Gen Z, I think, is so valuable with this, is getting their voice out there saying, like, don't, like, we just want the authentic thing. Just show
yeah,
us how the cookies are made. Like, just that's what we're going to do. We're going to buy from there. Like, just show us what's really happening. And
yeah.
that's who we're going to align with. And I think that goes for all of us and all humanity, and kind of always has been, but we're awakening to it again in a new
Hmm.
way. So I think you're bang on. I think you've got this amazing presence about you, as I said earlier, and I am so grateful that you went into this and were fearless to kind of just explore and see what we came up with. And thank you for sharing your story and for doing the work here. Do you have any final thoughts on, telling a better story in this world?
I just want to say thank you for holding space, because I think that you holding space for me even today is helping me to embody more of who I am. We need each other to do that, and I think that's important. Is holding that space for someone to explore that in themselves, and so I thank you for that, because I know
Yeah.
that that's going to help me take it to the next level. So I appreciate it.
Shoot. I love that. Fantastic. Maybe what you need to go and tell your story in a better way is just somebody to listen to it.
Yeah, who knew?
All right. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Thanks, Alex.